Aloha. It is Tom, of course, and well, this is going to be a good one. So this is a topic that I was debating saving for my advanced students. And you might think, well, if it's advanced, should I watch this video? The answer is yes, because I'm going to simplify some things, and I want to begin to get you thinking about astrological aspects in kind of a new way. It's a way that I have been doing for a while, and I haven't heard people talk about it this way. And so that's the whole point of this channel: give you things that are practical, tangible, and unique things that I haven't been hearing people talk about. It's why I wanted to make the channel. So aspects are the relationship between the energy of the planets in your astrology chart. We're going to go over some simple concepts of astrology, and often aspects aren't talked about right away. But if you looked at the video I did on going through Anne's article on the upcoming full moon, or anything like that, aspects come up quite a bit. They're like the relationship between, well, they are the relationship between the planets. So just like whether you're a good friend or a not so good friend with somebody, or whether it's an acquaintance or a friend or a family member, whatever the relationship you have with somebody, it's like the aspects are like that relationship with the planets. And so there's a few reasons why I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to get you to begin to unlock the energy in the aspects in your chart. So many astrologers focus on, okay, just, oh, here's what the chart is, here's what it says about you, here's who you are, and they don't give you anything tangible to do with it, or something that you can move with, that you can take action on. And these aspects begin to really show you what to do to unlock the energy in the chart. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And the specifics are going to be based on your personal astrological chart. So of course, if you want me to help you with that, I'll leave a link to schedule the reading in the description below, and we can go through that for you. This is the thinking that I do, which again is unique. I've taken a lot of astrology study, and have a good bit of people that practice some form of astrology in my circle, and nobody does it this way. And when I looked at my astrological chart, it talked about bringing my unique approach into the field. When I looked at what it meant, I had a couple of other astrologers look at it without priming them on what I thought, and I just said, what about, what should I do in the astrology space? And they both said, you need to do it in the way that is unique to you. So I want to share with you some ways to get you thinking about this, because I'm telling you, there's so much empowerment in the aspects when you think about them this way. So much empowerment. It just unlocks so much information. And so in a reading, I take the astrological information, I turn it into something that's personal for you based on your chart. And so I couldn't find people talking about this. And so I actually hope the video gets views, because people aren't thinking, how do I make aspects work? It's not something that generally are thinking. But I'm not just making these videos based on what I know people are looking for. I'm actually making these videos to also show you that there's another way to think about this stuff. There's a depth here that we can build on. And I put, for when I reincarnate, it'll be here. That's halfway kidding, halfway not. There's some of this information that I think about, well, gee, if I left the planet, nobody's teaching it this way, and I came back on the planet, how would I find it again? Would I be able to find it again? And so it just dawned on me, maybe that's part of the contribution that I have right now. And so maybe this video is one that people will watch later, after they've come to the channel through other means or watched other videos. And but because I don't think it's necessarily people going to see it in search. So I'm not making it for that purpose. I'm making it to show you the power in these aspects. So let's go over a little bit of Astro Basics, just very high level stuff here. So the planets are the energy, okay? The planets, and in the astrology that I practice, it's moon and sun are considered planets. They're also called luminaries with the lights. And then Mercury through Pluto. Yes, Pluto's included. We don't, of course, include Earth in that because the astrology that I'm practicing is looking at the zodiac from the perspective of Earth. Okay, so Earth isn't reflected in the chart; it's what you see when you look from. So the planets are the energy. Then the signs are how the energy expresses. So Aries through Pisces, right? Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces are the 12 signs, and they're how the energy expresses. They are made up of an element. The elements are fire, earth, air, and water, and they are made up of a modality: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Okay, so a lot of information. I promise it'll be okay. And the reason why it says and polarity in parentheses is because polarity is masculine, feminine, and the air, the fire and air elements, the signs that are a fire and air sign are masculine, and the signs that are water and earth are feminine. Okay, so Aries, Leo, and Sag, fire signs. Okay, they're masculine. Okay. What am I saying here? Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are the earth signs. They are feminine. Okay. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius are the air signs. They're masculine. And then Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are the water signs. They are feminine. And if you noticed, there are 3 signs in each element. Well, there are 3 modalities: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Cardinals are the initiators. The fixed are the ones that are able to kind of sustain, maintain. And the mutables, yes, there is a level of flexibility to the mutables, but what the mutables are doing is they're bringing something, they're beginning to bring something into completion, into manifestation, into fruition. The mutable signs tend to occur as a season is wrapping up in the year. Okay, so you can think of it like the cardinal is the starters, the initiators. The fixed signs are more like the transformers or maintainers, sustainers, and the mutables are those that help bring things into completion. So sometimes when we talk about the 3 basic energies, starting, changing, completing, transforming, completing, those relate very much to the 3 modalities. And so if you have the sign is made up of an element and a modality. Okay, so I said Aries, Leo, and Sag are the 3 fire signs. Aries is the cardinal fire sign. Leo is the fixed fire sign. Sag is the mutable fire sign. Okay, I'd have to go through all 12 to give you all of them. That's not as important for the discussion on aspects. And so but if you want, okay, fine. So that's fire. Earth. What's cardinal Earth? Cardinal Earth is Capricorn. Fixed Earth is Taurus, and mutable Earth is Virgo. Okay, cardinal air is Libra. Fixed air is Aquarius, and mutable air is Gemini. Okay, what's water? Cardinal air is Cancer, right? Mutable air, fixed water, excuse me. Cardinal water is Cancer. Fixed water is Scorpio, and mutable water is Pisces. Okay, so that's how they are. So somebody talks about a sign, it's like, well, what is that sign anyway? It's an element and a modality. And then the air and fire, the signs that are an air element or a fire element are masculine, the masculine polarity, and the signs that are water and earth are feminine polarity. Okay, so the polarity comes into the picture. Most people just stop, they look at signs, and they don't even look at element, modality, and polarity. And that is so key to understanding aspects. Okay, we're going to come right back to that. Let me just add on the fact that the houses, so the 12 sections of the chart, they are the areas of life. There's a lot of depth in that too, okay? Because they're not just, it's not just like you have 12 areas of life. Anything in your life, okay, is projected onto from one of those 12 sections. That's a whole other discussion. We're not even going to necessarily dive into houses in this particular, I was going to say webinar presentation, YouTube video, whatever. So that's just to let you know kind of how that fits in. And then what are aspects of the relationship between the planets? So, you know, if you have the sun and the moon, well, what's the relationship? How good are they together, the sun and the moon? What are they talking about, right? And that's what we're really going to focus on here. The signs, though, what we dove into with element, modality, and polarity, though, so important because that is key to aspects. And it's not a key that people talk about. Here's what people talk about. People say a conjunction. They use these fancy words: conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile, quincunx. Quincunx is sometimes called the inconjunct, totally unrelated to a conjunction. Okay, this is what people generally talk about. And they refer to the degrees. They say, well, conjunction is 0 degrees, and opposition is 180 degrees, a square is 90 degrees, trine is 120 degrees, sextile is 60 degrees, quincunx 150 degrees. There's other ways to talk about it. Some people say, well, quincunx is one sign off from the opposition, because it is. Okay. Sometimes they say a sextile is 2 signs over. Okay, fine. You know, in a system, you know, like what I'm using where there's 30-degree signs, that's exactly right. Here's the thing. And then they refer to these words. Okay, conjunction is a blending, opposition is a harmonizing, square is a challenge, trine is an ease, a gift, sextile is an opportunity, and a quincunx is an adjustment. Those words I will still agree with. The degrees I agree with. But here's the thing that people never ask. Why? Why is it that way? Why is 120 degrees a trine? Why? Please enlighten me. And so as an astrologer and somebody who is on an empowering path and using astrology and wanting to make things tangible, I had to ask myself this question. And so I dove into it and I realized, guess what? It's not the degrees that make the aspect work. The degrees help us calculate the aspect. They are the result of other things that are done. They are the emergent. It's the elements along with their modality and polarity that make it work. And thus, it's the element, modality, and polarity that teach us how to rise above it, that teach us how to unlock the energy in that aspect. Okay, so you have to come back to those. Now, let's begin to apply that for a second. Let's look at the square and the trine. The trine, considered an easy flowing aspect, considered something that, you know, it's an ease, it's a gift. And people just go, well, planets 120 degrees apart, so ease, it's gift, whatever. The trine, they're the same element. They're actually the same polarity. They're the same polarity too. Aries and Leo are going to trine. Leo and Sag are going to trine. Aries and Sag are going to trine. And they're the same polarity because they're the same element. If they're the same element, they're actually they're going to have the same polarity too because they're the same element. All right, so fire is going to be a masculine polarity. That's why it's in parentheses, right? So they're the same element. So if you think about there, you might have heard a concept of a grand trine. It's just a really easy thing. Whatever planets are involved in a grand trine, you know, so it would be like Aries trining Leo, trining. So a planet in Aries trining a planet in Leo, trining a planet in Sag, and then of course the planet in Aries trines the planet in Sag. And people go, well, whatever those planets are, oh my gosh, this is such an easy flowing thing. Oh, it's almost like you don't even have to work on that. And it's like, well, why? It's because for a grand trine, it's one element through each modality, through cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So you know how to start that element, you know how to turn that element in, like how to sustain that element, and you know how to complete that element into something, turn it into something. Well, no kidding. If you can move an element through creation, transformation, completion, okay, the 3 basic energies, then of course it's easy for you. No kidding. See, it comes down to the element, the modality, and the polarity. So then what's a square? Well, a square is often considered a challenge. It's talked about in a lot of astrological circles as a challenge, and then it's talked about in some empowerment spaces as it unlocks an energy underneath when you transcend the challenge. But nobody questions how. What's the whole point of rise above your chart? How do you do it? How do you actually get into that energy? Well, a square is the same modality. It's either cardinal, fixed, or mutable, right? So if you look at Aries squaring a planet in Aries squaring a planet in Cancer, okay, that's two cardinal signs. So it's a square between two cardinal planets, okay? Aries is fire, Cancer is water, fire is masculine, water is feminine. They are not the same polarity. The exclamation point means not in this notation, okay? So they are not the same polarity, but they are the same modality. So they're not the same element. They're not the same polarity. They're only the same modality. So you know how to get started. For example, if they're two cardinals, you know how to get started with the same element, or you know how to sustain with the same element, or you know how to bring to completion with the same element. But you can't unlock the energy of those planets just with one of creation, transformation, or completion. You have to be able to bring it through. Okay, so that's why the energy unlocks when you get in touch, when you're able to transcend that space. So for a grand square, it's 4 planets squaring. So it'd be like Aries, a planet in Aries, squaring a planet in Cancer, right? Squaring a planet in Libra, squaring a planet in Capricorn. Well, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, okay, are they're all the 4 cardinal signs, which are the 4 elements. So a grand square is one modality through each element. So why is there a huge amount of energy that's waiting to be unlocked with the grand square? Because it's one modality that's strong, getting started, transforming, completing, cardinal, fixed, mutable. You just have to be able to. You just have through. You have it through each of the 4 elements. Okay, so you're able to bring energy. It would be like saying, let's say water is related to the emotions, right? So if somebody is able to start emotions, maintain emotions, and bring emotions to completion through an experience, they've really strengthened that emotional aspect of who they are, that emotional body, that component of who they are. Okay, so it's almost like you have cardinal, fixed, immutable spiritually, cardinal, fixed, immutable mentally, cardinal, fixed, immutable emotionally, cardinal, fixed, immutable physically, and that relates to the 4 elements. Okay, if it's spiritual, then spiritual fire, mental air, emotional water, physical earth, and so that's why this makes sense. So if you're able, when you're talking about manifestation and you're moving things through, right? We talked about in a previous video, we talked about purpose, and we talked about the mind, and we talked about the physical world. The mind can be broken up into mental and emotional. Purpose can be related to spiritual. Physical world's the physical world, physical body, physical world. Okay. And so it's like, this is the process of manifestation. It's just getting good at cardinal, fixed, and mutable through each of the 4 elements. Okay. So, grand trine, 1 element through each modality. Grand square, 1 modality through each element. Okay. So let's keep going from this. So a conjunction then, historically, the same sign. There's a thing called out of sign aspects. Okay. Historically, they would not look at conjunctions that weren't the same aspect. That weren't the same sign. And I used to wonder about that. I used to go, well, wait a minute, why would they do that? And my conclusion is basically because of this, because you have the fact that they're free flowing. They're getting along really, really, really well if they are the same sign and they're together. of course. That's what a conjunction is going to be. If you take the more common approach today, it's a like blending of two energies, the planets that are very, very close together like a blender. There's a lot of moving pieces. They're able to interact. The key then is if you're using an out of sign conjunction, you gotta really be able to know the distinction between the two signs because they're all mixed together. It's like if you put ingredients together in a blender, let's say you're making a, I don't know, a protein shake or something, you put different ingredients together. You know, you have to know the quality of each of those ingredients to come out with something that's sustainable, that's something that's going to taste good or whatever. Okay. So historically, they're only going to count a conjunction if it's the same sign. If it's blending in a more common today world, then you got to know the distinction between the two signs that are blending, because you got to know which components in the blender are one sign versus the other to truly master that conjunction. Okay, I tend to take the blender approach. It's a little bit trickier to rise above, but I tend to take that approach because I believe that if you look at it from an as above, so below perspective, if the planets are that close together in the solar system anyway, the two energies are very, very much related. They're interacting, and so I think that in ancient times, or where they would not consider an out of sign conjunction a conjunction, I still think that they did look at the fact that the planets were that close together, and there's something to do with that. They just wouldn't have called it a conjunction, because sometimes people just think, oh my gosh, it's free flowing. It's a nice connection between these two energies because it's a conjunction, right? The people think, oh, they're just naturally blending. Well, if they're not the same sign, they're actually not naturally blending. They're just all a bunch of mush, and you have to understand what portion of the blender is one ingredient, okay, versus the other. Okay, so then with the opposition, well, the opposition is a sign pair. The sign pairs come up so much. They're the ascendant, descendant. They're the 4th and 10th. They're the nodal paths. They're so. Aries is paired with Libra. Taurus is paired with Scorpio. Gemini is paired with Sag. Cancer is paired with Capricorn. Right? Leo is paired with Aquarius. Okay. Virgo is paired with Pisces. I think did I miss one? No, I didn't. Right? So Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. Yeah, that's right. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. So there's 6 sign pairs. Okay. The opposition is a sign pair. That gives you a clue in and of itself, because there's a way to harmonize the sign pairs. Whole nother conversation, something very important. The oppositions are the same modality and same polarity. Okay. They're the same modality and same polarity. Aries is opposing Libra. Aries is fire. Aries is cardinal fire. Libra is cardinal air. Okay. They're both cardinal, same modality. And a fire and air are the two masculine sign elements. Same polarity. Okay. What are they not the same of? They're not the same element. Okay. So this starts to give you an idea of how you step out of these aspects is by actually diving into the things that they're not. Okay. So we'll get to that in a second. So what's a sextile then? Well, it's half a trine, and it's the same polarity only. So if you recall, right, what's a trine? A trine is the same element and the same polarity. Well, a sextile is actually just the same polarity. Okay. So Aries and Gemini, okay, they sextile. The Aries is cardinal fire. Gemini is mutable air. Okay. They're not the same element because one's fire and one's air. Okay. They're not the same modality because one's cardinal and one's mutable. But Aries is fire and Gemini is air, and fire and air are the masculine elements. So they are the same polarity. Okay. What about a quincunx? I actually consider the quincunx to be tougher than the opposition. Traditional astrology considers the opposition to be the hardest because the planets are the further away. The thought is the closer they are together, the easier things are. And I disagree with that. because an opposition has a way to harmonize. It's like if you're on a seesaw, you're opposing one another, you can balance at some point. But a quincunx, you're a little bit off from that even spot. You can't even make a seesaw that does something like that. It would never be able to go up and down because it's a little bit off from that directly opposing point. And to put it in an element, modality, and polarity perspective, a quincunx or an inconjunct is a different element, a different modality, and a different polarity. It's a different, all of them. So of course we say it requires an adjustment. No kidding. It's so different. Okay. So this is such a passionate topic of mine, this whole concept, because it's not talked about, and it's something that I've been using for a very long time. And I just said, you know what? It's going to take me a little while to get students to a point where I could dive deeper in this. So I said, let me just start putting the information out there. That's why we're sharing it. So now let's just put this all simply together in a nice little chart. So if you have the conjunction, I say historically, we would only count the same sign. So everything's green, the element, the modality, and the polarity, because we would only be counting the same sign. What is a sign? A sign is an element and a modality. So therefore, if you have an element and a modality together, you're going to get the polarity, because as we talked about, the polarity is related to the element, right? So historically, it'd all be the same. An opposition is not the same element, but it's the same modality and the same polarity. A square is not the same element, but it's the same modality. It's not the same polarity. A trine, it's the same element, but not the same modality, and it is the same polarity too. A sextile, not the same element, not the same modality, but it is the same polarity. A quincunx, not the same element, not the same modality, not the same polarity. Okay, so important. So when we want to rise above these, what do we actually have to do? So again, for the conjunction, if you're using out of sign aspects, you have to be aware of the qualities of the two elements and the planets related to them. It's a lot harder to explain without looking at your particular chart, because you have to know, okay, is it 3 parts Uranus and 2 parts Mars, or, as you're mixing things up in the blender. If you're using same sign aspects, it's pretty easy. A lot of your planets that are in the same sign, if they're conjunct, they're going to be pretty straightforward. Nothing really that's where the whole idea of, oh, I don't have necessarily anything to do with this kind of comes from. The opposition, well, look at what the 2 different elements are and find a harmony between those 2 elements. Find a harmony between those 2 elements. For a square, you have to consider the element and the polarity. Squares are tricky, right? Because you have, let's say you have let's say Aries and Cancer. So they're both cardinal. They both want to start, okay? But one's that fiery start, one's that watery start. And to top it off, the fire is masculine and active. The water is feminine and receptive, right? The active and receptive, or active and passive principles. So you have to harmonize the masculine feminine aspect of that, the active and passive aspect. Okay, we're not talking masculine feminine as in male female. We're talking masculine feminine as in energy, like the positive and negative polarity of a battery is what we're really referring to. One side of the battery, the electrons come out, the other side receives them. That's the idea here. So there's a harmony though between them. Okay, harmonizing the polarity and then harmonizing the element. Okay, if you realize a square is 90 degrees and opposition is 180, you could say a square is half of an opposition. Well, no kidding. What half is it? It doesn't. The square doesn't have the same polarity. If you harmonize the polarity without the element, you've effectively turned it into the energy of an opposition. Ta-da! Okay, so then a trine is yes to the same element, no to the same modality, and yes to the same polarity. So you need to then you want to harmonize the idea. So if you have of the 2 different modalities, it's taking that element through the 2 modalities. So if you have a trine between cardinal fire and fixed fire, so Aries and Leo, is learning how to sustain the fire, right? To bring it through. If it's between Leo and Sag, it's bringing it through and then completing whatever you're doing with the fire energy, because Sag is the mutable fire sign, right? So it's tapping into what that same modality, what that modality movement is between them. Well, a sextile, again, half a trine. Which half? It's not the same element. Okay, it's not. So if you what they often say that sometimes if you work on a sextile in one life, it can come back as a trine in the next. Okay, well, the way to work on the sextile then is to begin to actually understand the element, the differences in the elements between those two. So if you look at Cardinal Air, we could do Cardinal Air, sure. Cardinal Air is Libra, and then if you pick a sextile to that, you're going to go Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, right? So Sag, well, if we look at Libra, which is Cardinal Air, and we look at Sag, which is mutable fire, they have the same polarity. They're both masculine. If we worked on the differences between the element, between the fire and the air, it effectively becomes the same element, which turns it into a trine. Okay, and I'm talking now a little bit esoteric. I probably it's taking that out of context isn't going to make any sense. Putting it into the grand scheme of things is going to make sense, because when you've harmonized, here's the thing, here's the secret. When you've harmonized the differences between these, they turn into the same thing. Okay, if you harmonize what removes the differences in the element between whatever two planets are sextile, it turns it effectively into the same element, which turns it into more like a trine-like energy. Okay, if you remove any differences of something, you're going to get the same thing. You're going to get the similarity. You're going to get the thing together, right? If you take two things and you remove all the differences between them, you turn it into the same thing. Okay, so then what's a quincunx? Again, not the same element, not the same modality, not the same polarity. Does it mean it can't be handled? No. What kind of adjustment is necessary? An adjustment that actually addresses each of these. Let me harmonize between the elements. Let me harmonize between the modality. Let me harmonize between the polarity. Here's the thing, though. If you've done that with the others, then doing the quincunx has become a lot easier, because you get familiar with the energy of harmonizing polarity. You get familiar with the energy of harmonizing modality, and you get familiar with the energy of harmonizing the elements. So then you just do the same thing for the quincunx and it becomes really easy. Quincunx is going to be the hardest to start with, in my opinion, because there's nothing else to harmonize. So if you start with the ones that only have one no in the column, so the opposition or the trine, then you actually can address those a bit easier. The trine's probably going to be the easiest. So here's the thing: people think the trine is the easiest to begin with, and it's almost like there isn't any work to do. There is still work to do between the modalities of the trine. There is, because you need to be able to ensure that you are moving that energy through those two modalities. So if you're starting, if you're starting something, let's say an Earth, you're going from let's say Capricorn to Taurus, then are you starting something in the physical world and then being able to sustain it? And then if you're going between a Taurus and Virgo, are you sustaining something in the physical world and being able to actually complete it? Because the trine might go, well, yeah, it's an easy thing for me to start and sustain, or it's an easy thing for me to sustain and complete. And it's like, but there's still a piece missing. That's why the grand trine, oh, it's such an easy thing for me to start, sustain, and complete, because it's the same element throughout the three modalities. Okay, so in a grand trine, is there much work to do? No, because a grand trine is going to address the modality from the other aspect of the planet. However, if the energy is getting stuck at any point in that grand trine, I'm going to look at the modality between whichever two planets it's getting stuck in if somebody has a problem with it. The grand trine, which is different than a regular trine, right? It's a trine where there's yet a third planet involved, okay, is going to take into account that other modality, okay? Because in a trine, you have one planet in one modality, one planet in another modality. And if you have a grand trine, you're going to have a third planet in the third modality. That is going to refine that element for you. Really, what these aspects are trying to do, in my opinion, from an esoteric perspective, is they're all wanting to rise to the level of the elements. And then they're wanting to come together because it's the elements that make up everything. And if the elements all come together, we essentially ascend back to spirit. So the goal is to elevate each of these aspects to that of an element. And that is a whole nother conversation. We've got to start somewhere. And that's why I said I was waiting to save this for some of my advanced students, because that's what I really want to talk to. I really want to talk about. It's like, okay, let's work on each of these and elevate them to the level of an element. And get the energy moving through the elements, because if you get the energy moving through the elements, you have effectively handled all of this. Okay, so I hope that helps. It's an extremely passionate topic for me. Not all the videos on this channel will be this deep into astrology, but this is one that, for people who know me, some of those that know that I do astrology, or they're familiar with some astrological concepts, I thought it would be a good one to put out. If you have any ideas for how to for where you would want to use astrology, or things you want clarification on, if you have any questions about this or any other astrological topic, anything that you want me to cover, please do leave a comment below, and that'll give me some ideas for what to focus on in future videos as well. And if you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, aloha, hui ho. I will talk with you again soon. Take care.